Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first Quick Tip Tuesdays of 2019. Today, we're going to talk about the top scams of 2018. If you have not joined us for Quick Tip Tuesdays before, it's pretty simple. It's just a quick webinar designed to help your accredited business. Today, we have a new speaker today. It's Emily Tomusco. She's our creative marketing assistant, and she will begin by talking about the top scams. If you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the comment box. I will be happy to answer them at the end.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pam. As Pam just said, my name is Emily. I'm going to be leading you through the top scams of 2018. As you can see, we have 5 laid out there for us that we'll be discussing today. And thanks for joining us on this cold and frosty Tuesday morning. So let's go ahead and get started, starting with number 5. So scam number 5 was online purchases. Now, the total loss for online purchases over 2018 from people in our 5-county service area was about a little over $10,000, actually close to $11,000. And that top payment method that people were using for these online purchases for this particular scam was credit cards. Now, how you spot an online purchase scam. We have a few little red flags here you should always be aware of. Number 1 is if the seller or website or what have you pressures you to pay outside of the website's payment methods. So a very popular, secure way to pay for items that you're purchasing online is through PayPal, but maybe you are purchasing these from a seller who really is pressuring you to pay them via wire transfer or something similar. That should be a red flag for you as you are making this purchase. Another way to spot that scam is pressure by the seller to make a large purchase. So something like a car or a pet, or sometimes even apartments or condos, timeshares, things like that, sight unseen. And the third red flag that you will see if this has the potential to be an online purchase scam is incredibly low price compared to similar sellers. So maybe you're looking at TVs and the particular model that you are interested in is about $800, and then you go to another website and you see that they have that same exact model for $500, maybe even $400. While instinctually, I think all of us want to go for the good deal, that large price gap is a red flag for buyers. That's something you should be aware of, because if it sounds too good to be true, then it probably is. So then ways you can protect yourself against these online purchase scams. As I just mentioned a second ago, rule of thumb, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Use websites or payment methods that provide buyer protection services. So as I mentioned, PayPal a minute ago, they do a very good job of protecting their buyers, being able to just sort of prevent you getting scammed out of these online purchases. And that's also why we recommend using a credit card whenever you are purchasing online, because you have a much higher chance of being able to recover the money that was lost, or being able to just cancel your card and protect your identity. Whereas if you use a debit card, you don't have that same security. All right, moving on to scam number 4. So the 4th most prolific scam in our service area in 2018 was government grants, and total loss in this area was almost $5,000. We were getting right up to $5,000, and this top payment method was prepaid cards. So we're talking gift cards or debit cards, the Visa gift cards that you can get at any grocery store or gas station. Now, how you spot these government grant scams. Unsolicited contact through phone calls, emails, or social media. This is a biggie for this particular scam. You will be contacted by someone, particularly phone calls we've seen, saying that you have qualified for this grant that you never even applied for. Second way to spot this scam is you are asked to pay an advance fee to receive the grant. So you are contacted by someone that you have had no contact with before, and they tell you, this is great, congratulations, you've just qualified for this $50,000 grant. Now you just need to send me $2,000 in Google Play gift cards or iTunes gift cards or Target gift cards, any sort of thing like that, in order to get that $50,000 grant. The third way you can spot this scam is this particular caller or whoever has contacted you says, hey, this is great. You're never going to have to repay the money, and you can use this grant for anything. No bars on this grant. You pay the $2,000, get your $50,000, and you can use this on housing, you can use this on education, you can use this on your car, on food, and you're never going to have to pay any of that back. And finally, the call is coming, or this contact is coming from a quote unquote look-alike organization that doesn't really exist. So popular one for scammers to use is saying that they're calling from the Federal Grants Administration. Sounds very authoritative, sounds like something that you've heard of before, or even if you haven't heard of it, the name speaks for itself. However, that organization does not actually exist, and they're trying to fool you into believing that it does. So how do you protect yourself then against these government grant scams? Best way, never give your banking information to a person or a company that you don't know, or, as I mentioned before, someone that is an unsolicited contact. If you did not go to this government agency and ask about these grants, ask about funding, never did any of that, and people are still coming to you and saying that you've qualified for a grant, that should definitely be a red flag for you before you give them your banking information. Number two, never pay someone in cash or gift cards to be eligible for a grant or loan. We'll talk about this with the sweepstakes loans or the sweepstakes scams, but never pay to play. And it's very similar with these government grants. You will never have to pay a certain amount of money up front if you are actually receiving a legitimate government grant. They will not ask for money up front. And more importantly, the government doesn't want your gift cards, unfortunately. They don't want your gift cards. So if someone says that they are a government official, government employee, and they are asking you to pay them in gift cards, that should be setting off some alarm bells for you. And finally, our third way of protecting yourself against government grants, and this really applies to almost all the scams we're going to be talking about today, screen your calls. I think that's one of the best ways to protect yourself, because let's say you get this phone call from a number you don't know, it's not coming up on your caller ID as someone you recognize. Let it go to voicemail. If it is important, if it is someone you know, they will leave you a message. If it's not important, they won't. And let's say it's not important, they do leave a message, you're still going to be able to weed out the legitimate calls from the non-legitimate calls. Alrighty, so moving on to scam number 3. So as I just mentioned, sweepstakes scams. These lost about $1,800, and the top payment method was wire transfer or prepaid card, similar to the government grants, so something like a debit or a gift card. Now, the way that you spot a sweepstakes scam, again, unsolicited contact. Unsolicited contact of any form should be a huge red flag as you are getting these phone calls or these emails or these texts, and this is the same thing. So unsolicited phone calls or emails informing you that you've won a lottery that, more importantly, you never even applied for or never even entered. So thinking of Publishers Clearinghouse, everyone knows Publishers Clearinghouse. Everyone wants that huge check, but you have to apply or you have to enter these Publishers Clearinghouse's sweepstakes in order to qualify. So if you've never applied for anything and you're getting these phone calls, that's probably a scam. Secondly, like the government grants, you're asked to pay a fee to receive your winnings. You should never have to pay to play. And third, you are given a check to cover the taxes from the winnings, and then you're asked to deposit that check into your account and send the quote unquote taxes in the form of a gift card or wire transfer. Gift cards or wire transfers, as I mentioned a few times already, are always a big red flag, because once that money is sent, it's gone. It's very difficult. I don't want to say impossible, but it's very difficult for you to recover the money that you have sent through a gift card or a wire transfer, which is why scammers, and particularly in this scam, really pressure you to pay that way so they can just get the money and run. Now, how you protect yourself from these sweepstakes scams? Be suspicious of irregular communication. So by regular communication, we mean junk mail or texts or communication like that, because it's not personalized. This is something that they're just sending out en masse, and it's something that is probably, unfortunately, not legitimate. Number two, know that checks can bounce or be determined as fraudulent weeks after a check has supposedly already cleared. So this is in reference to when this person who has contacted you is sending you the money to cover those quote unquote taxes, right? So you get that check, you want to get this lottery, this sweepstakes earnings. So you deposit the check into your bank, everything's fine. You send it over to this third party and everything's great. Except then a few weeks later, the bank contacts you and says, hey, that check that you deposited a few weeks ago is fraudulent. Now guess who's left to cover that balance, or just money lost, or cover the check bouncing, whatever may happen in that scenario. Unfortunately, it's going to be you. So know that just because the check goes through that first day, it doesn't mean that it's a legitimate check. Number 4 and 5 go hand in hand. I've mentioned this phrase a few times already, but never pay to play and know you have to play to win. Same thing, never pay to play with the government grants. It's the same thing here. Do not pay to collect your earnings from a sweepstakes or a lottery or contest, what have you, and know that you actually have to enter or apply for that sweepstakes, lottery, or contest, etc., to actually win. All right. So moving on to scam number 2. This scam is really heating up. We are seeing a lot more of this, and people of truly all age ranges are falling for this scam. So tech support scams. The total lost was a little bit over $10,000, and the top payment method was credit card. So how this scam works, how you can spot tech support scams. You receive a phone call or a pop-up on your computer when you are online that notifies you that your computer is infected. Now, note that these pop-ups or these calls are not coming from your antivirus protection services. So if you have Norton or McAfee or anything like that, that's not what these notifications are coming for. These are coming when you're online or unsolicited phone calls. So if they call you on the phone, they say your computer's infected. If you get the pop-up, they say your computer's infected, call us at this number. If you call that number, or that employee that has called you, they will probably tell you that they are from Microsoft. They are not from Microsoft, but they tell you that they can clean your computer for a fee. If you give remote access when you're on the phone with them, they say, hey, we can clean your computer for a fee. You say, that's great. I don't want this virus, do what you got to do. They will take full control of your computer, and you'll see them move things around on your computer screen, actually. Now, why this is a particular reason or a particular way for you to spot the scam is if you have ever, if you have a Mac or an Apple product and you've called Apple Care, they are very conscious of not moving things or clicking on things on your computer without your permission. So you will give them remote access, and what you'll see is this big red arrow that will appear on your screen, and then they will point to things and they'll say, okay, now I want you to click here. Now I want you to do this. They will ask you to perform those actions. They will not just start moving things around on your computer. So if you've given this person access and they just start clicking things, opening documents, what have you, that is probably a scam. And what they're probably doing is uploading malware or viruses onto your computer. Now, ways you can protect yourself from these particular scams. Number one, never give control of your computer to someone unless it's someone that you've actually contacted yourself. So if you go to, the Genius Bar at an Apple store, if you call Apple Care or Microsoft support, if you actually contact them directly first, that's different. But it's these unsolicited contacts that can just be very sketchy, and you never want to give someone full control of your computer to someone that has contacted you via unsolicited means. Two, legitimate software and support companies will not perform unsolicited phone calls. So if you're getting these unsolicited phone calls in the first place, that's a huge red flag. It's really expensive for US companies to perform over the phone solicitation. So they're not just going to call you out of the blue to tell you that you have a virus. So that should be a red flag when someone calls you and says, hey, I'm from Microsoft, because they probably aren't. Three, if you have received a pop-up, do not call that number provided. Shut down your computer and restart it. Also recommend, if you do have some sort of antivirus protection on your computer, giving it a scan once you restart your computer, or, calling the actual legitimate Apple Care. But don't call that number that is popping up at you telling you have a virus. Now, this one is particularly insidious. Be wary of sponsored ads when you search for tech support. Very good friend of mine fell for this scam herself because she had a Mac and something was going wrong with it, can't really recall, but she Googles Apple Care. And, if you Google things regularly, you'll be familiar with the fact that when you Google something, there will usually be 2 to 3 listings at the very top of the page that say ad next to them. Now, most people just think they are legitimate, that that is actually Apple Care's number that's being provided under that listing. Scammers and these companies are actually paying to have their listings boosted to the top of these Google search reviews, or Google searches. I apologize for that. And when you call them, you're not calling Apple Care. You are calling these scammers. But it seems like you're calling Apple Care because, hey, it's the first listing, right? That's exactly what she thought, and she fell victim to this. And then finally, this is always a good rule of thumb, but don't click links in unfamiliar emails or from emails you don't recognize or emails that just seem odd. Chances are it's probably a virus waiting for you on the other end, and no one really wants to deal with that. So those are probably the best ways to protect yourself against these tech support scams. Alrighty, last but not least, phishing scams. Now, over 18, the total lost was only about $300, but phishing scams are still one of the most popular ways, or one of the most popular scams. And again, another insidious example, because the main goal of these scams is to gain access to your personal information. So, how you spot the scam. You will probably receive an email, a phone call, or text message where you are urged to click a link or share information, download an attachment, some sort of engagement, right? They want you to engage with this form of communication. Now, that email, call, or text is going to do one of three things, One, it's going to promise a reward, or it's going to threaten a punishment, or finally, it's doing something entirely mundane. An example of the entirely mundane one, just because I feel like that's probably the example that most of us are least familiar with, is currently scammers will email HR departments and just pose as an employee, say, hey, I just want to change, got a new bank account. I just want to change my direct deposit. Something entirely mundane that HR departments do all the time, right? So it doesn't raise eyebrows, but that email is not coming from an employee. It is coming from a scammer. And the account they want you to change it to is their own account. Now, how do you protect yourself against these scams? Number one, don't give out personal information through unsolicited texts or phone calls. Again, that applies to almost all the scams we talked about today, but treat your personal information like gold, like cash. Don't just hand it out to anyone that calls you and says, hey, I can help you get more Social Security benefits. Unsolicited phone calls are always a red flag. Number two, if something sounds suspicious, hang up or ignore the text or email and contact the company directly. A very good example of this is this past year, Social Security scams really just took an obscene amount of money this year. The scammers really stepped up their game, unfortunately, because what they would do, they started spoofing Social Security's customer service number. So, number one, you think it's Social Security, the Social Security office calling you, and they would contact people who were receiving Social Security benefits. And in one instance, they would say, hey, give me your personal information. If you don't do this, I'm going to take away your benefits, or you're on disciplinary action. So they're making a threat, right? One of the examples I just talked about. Another way that they use Social Security to scam people receiving benefits is saying, hey, I could increase your benefits. I could get you more benefits, and which is very enticing for a lot of people. So that is the example of promising a reward, right? So those are two very typical ways that they will try to coerce you into giving them your personal information, because they're not going to increase your benefits. You're not on disciplinary action from the IRS or Social Security. They just want your personal information, because once they have that, they can really do anything. And then finally, be cautious of generic emails, texts, or phone calls. There have been some texts going out pretending to be texts from your bank and saying, oh, your account is locked, or, click this link to be taken to your account. Something kind of generic. It doesn't reference your account or your name specifically. And they just really want you to click that link or respond to that text or whatever the case may be in order to get your personal information. Alrighty, so that brings us to the end of the top scams of 2018. Always good to just kind of keep this in the back of your mind, because anyone can fall victim to scams. They are professionals. These scammers are really good at their jobs, unfortunately, and we're here to help make sure that you don't fall victim to them, that you have all the information you need to make these smart and safe decisions with your personal information, with your identity, and with your finances. So that brings us to the end. Thank you very much for tuning in, everyone. I hope you have a warm and cozy Tuesday in the midst of this, or at the tail end of this winter storm. It's really bitter out there in Cleveland, Ohio. And that's it. Everyone have a good day. Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.